Our first speaker this morning is Bruce Corley. I was given Bruce's name and I contacted him, and I remember my first phone conversation with Bruce. It probably lasted a full hour. He has a lot of experience, especially with the commercial side. So those of you that own commercial properties, Bruce is a good guy to talk to. His family background is in commercial development and building. He is an expert, as is explained in the sheet. If you didn't pick one up about the speakers, you may want to do that. It's down in the lobby. And but I because of the excitement in his voice and in his attitude, positive attitude towards heritage designation, and what it could do for a community, I thought this would be great to have him start off and give us some vision of maybe what Cookstown could become as a heritage district. And this afternoon, he is a particular expert on assessing historical buildings and doing drawings and so on. On the technical side, he'll have a few minutes to talk about that too. So, and if you want to talk to him about that during the breaks, please do that. That's enough of listening to my voice. All I want to do today, I think my work's done. So this is your meeting, and the speakers, I'll just try and string things together as we go through the day. Bruce.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. The question of the vision for Cookstown is an ominous subject. And really, I don't want to answer that question. The vision for Cookstown is really up to all of you. What I would like to address are the factors that will be playing on this community in the next 5 to 10 years that you can either take advantage of or they will take advantage of you. And I have developed a sort of singular passion, my wife would call it an obsession, in measuring and documenting historic buildings. And the process of looking very closely at historic buildings has allowed me to understand how they were built and understand the care that went into those structures and what their intrinsic value is, as well as their economic value. That background experience, I've learned what people know, what they don't know. Perspective is really important. And it's not your perspective, it's other people's perspective. Because when you're speaking with other people, they don't necessarily have exactly the same views that you do. And what their goals are or the forces acting on them might be quite different than yours. And you need to understand what those are so that you know what they're going to do. You're playing chess with 5 or 6 or 7, 10 different groups, and they all have different moves, different people on the chessboard, and what they're going to do is based on a series of other actions that other people take. Postulate that the creation of a heritage district is at least potentially a very good thing to preserve the community as you know it. And the change that you're going to experience is already beginning. You can see the new house developments to the south. And that change is going to happen, and it will either overwhelm the community or you can direct it and be happy with the community that you end up with. But it will be different. And a commercial building has, in essence, no value without a tenant in it. And different groups here may represent different aspects of your community. There's politicians, developers, there are people that are residents, there's people from industry, there may be people that are planners or involved in the development process, hopefully local surrounding people like farmers, and everybody has a stake in what's going to change. The key thing that was discussed earlier about the community, it was in 4 pieces originally. That's a critical issue because there's a force that's acting on the community all the time in the sense of the roads that could divide the piece of pie back into four. I mean, it's very easy to quarter this village. If you think of Highway 400 here, and there's the community and the highways in the four pieces, you have development over on the 400 and lots of traffic there with the Tanger Outlet Mall. You have a little plaza at the bottom of the community and a little one on the west, and a little bit of commercial development on the north side, and then the heritage commercial on the main street. So in essence, there are forces that are tugging the community in different directions. Historically, the evolution of commercial real estate, you can see it on the downtown. There are the small buildings built, and that small town commercial development lasted until really the turn of the century into the 1920s. Post-war shopping centers and communities started to develop a kind of a strip commercial retail tail out one side of the community with car dealerships and fast food outlets and various industry, and it would drag the center away from the historic core of the community. The core of your community is the crossroads. And a heritage district, one of the things it will try to do is to keep that core vibrant so that the community is not fractured into quarters. And that's a critical issue, so that what you live with today and what you see and how you perceive it remains. It's going to be critical into your future to always be able to walk across those main highways, 27 or 89, without fear for your lives. There will be an impetus in the future, and there will be enormous political pressure to widen roads so that commuters can move back and forth faster. And that's going to be an enormous thing to resist, because if you simply become a set of highways, you will become four communities. So a heritage district can slow that traffic down. And you want it to be safe on an ongoing basis for your children to cross the road, or your grandchildren, or yourself when you're seniors or whatever. You need to be able to walk to your friend's house, go shopping, and that sort of thing. Commuters have one agenda on their mind when they're passing your community, and that is time. They want to get to work or home from work as fast as possible. And so they'll either go through your community at lightning speed, or they'll go around it some other way at lightning speed. You might look at commuters that don't live in the community as not part of the community, but they do offer some potential to the community, because the one thing commuters don't have is time. So you might offer them the ability to shop or to bank or to purchase fuel, or to come and visit on the weekend. And there are business opportunities that are related to that. A lot of them buy their lunch at the Tim Hortons and then go off to work, or they get their morning coffee there. There's opportunity for business to service commuters on their way. But there are business opportunities that relate to commuters. When you think about what the retail development interests are that are coming to the community, they're looking to serve not just the local community, but the traffic flow. When a development company or like a bank or whether it's Tim Hortons or a food store, they all look at the community two different ways. They look at it from the point of view of the fixed population who exists in the town and the traffic count. This community in Cookstown, when I drive through it and look at it, and I put on my sort of commercial development glasses, it has good bones. So it has the essence of what you require to create a viable heritage community like Oakville or Niagara-on-the-Lake, two very affluent communities. Niagara-on-the-Lake gets more repeat customers than they do first-time visitors. And Niagara-on-the-Lake has more visitors, or had more visitors, than Banff, Alberta. The Americans who would come up from Buffalo to visit loved it. They loved this sort of British heritage image that the community had. And that was its sort of selling point, this very early Canadian, British background. And that leads me to another group of people who will come to your community, and that is tourists. It is possible to have people come here to as tourists. You may go, why would anyone come here? Well, it may be for the things that you love about your community that you don't really recognize or value. When I drive around Cookstown, the original part of the heritage community has modest-sized houses on large lots. And if you look at the new development, you have modest-sized lots and large houses. Modern development uses every inch of the available density that is zoned for development. And they largely have to do that. So the space that you have, the charm of the community, as I say, it has good bones. Businesses can be created here that will attract people as visitors. In essence, when you go shopping, the first thing that you need are what I would refer to as necessities. You need a food store, a drugstore, a bank, and a hardware store, and perhaps gas. The plaza to the west provides that. There's a drugstore, there's a food store, there's a hardware store across the street. Those are your necessities. I lease to addictions: sugar, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and fat. It's true. You think about it, lottery tickets, you think about, what's in a convenience store? Nothing your mother would want you to buy. And when you think about a grocery store, my wife said, Bruce, don't go into the center of the grocery store when you buy groceries. Shop the perimeter, the fresh vegetables, the meat, the dairy, and leave. Don't go down the aisles, because there temptation lies. And that leads to the next thing that you lease to when you're leasing a commercial shopping center. And that's basically laziness. And so you have things like dry cleaners and people that do the work for you. So fast food is sort of bridges those two. They'll make your dinner and they'll make you fat. But we all love that stuff. But it makes retail commercial work. But it's not what a tourist is necessarily looking for. A tourist is looking for something that is different. They're looking for something that they can't buy at their local plaza in downtown Toronto. They would like to find something authentic, something real, something handmade. When people are coming into the community, as tourists, they're looking for something that they can't find at home. So to go back to the development side for a moment, the heritage commercial became post-war shopping centers, and then they eventually built malls, and then now there's these big box stores. Those forces are working on you, and you don't realize it yet, but there are people sitting in office towers who have maps of Ontario, and they have pins in them. And they have pins where they are, and they have pins where they want to go. The problem is that those economic forces drive change. If you are a developer, you have to go that way. And the local farmer who has the beautiful farm that you look out of your back room window is a farmer, and he's interested in your community, and he cares, and he loves this land until someone offers him $1 million an acre for his land. And at that point, he's a developer. The issue is money. You're never going to stop the money. The money will come. In essence, the only reason we're really here today is the government, the provincial government created the protected lands of the Oak Ridges Moraine. So all the developers that have been eating up the communities to the south, Oakville, Markham, where George is from, all those communities, Brampton, that are now fully developed, or pretty much fully developed, the land has run out. And those developers are now leapfrogging over the Oak Ridges Moraine and landing on your community. So the politicians today are faced with very well financed, very, very competent lawyers, planners, and construction crews and retail people and house designers who know how the development game works. They know all the acts, they know all the legislation, and they're better at it than you are. And they get what they want. They hire consultants, be they architects, who look at the heritage aspect. If they, for example, buy a farm, they look at the heritage aspect of the farmhouse and they'll say, well, you've got 10 other examples of that farmhouse, therefore we want to demolish it. So the criteria upon which you decide to preserve your heritage buildings will affect how they act and behave. I don't want to touch on the political side or the various other sides of development that are sort of controversial, but everyone in this room has different views of whatever degree on what commercial development can achieve, what mixed government commercial development can achieve, and what government development can achieve. We have different aspects of how much interference should be in our lives. And so the creation of a heritage community and the support by the OMB to sort of force this on the community is, some people may say this is a bad thing because I can't go and just demolish my house and build a large house on it. That's where the perspective comes in. If you go to Fort York today, you can't see the water from Fort York. You have no idea of its relationship to its original landscape. You don't realize the things that you have here that are valuable, that are free, that are potentially at jeopardy. But if you have a heritage district, there is a control over the things that you don't own, that you can preserve. The open spaces between some of the houses. There's that lovely farmhouse just to the east of here at the top of the hill, the big white one. But it has a huge lot around it. In Toronto, that would be subdivided into about 10 houses around it. And at some point, the owner might want to do that. But if there's a process that they have to go through because it's a heritage district, your input and your say on that change is considered in a way that it would otherwise not be considered. If there wasn't a heritage district, that developer, that owner could turn developer and just say, you know, I'm going to put 50 houses onto this. Or I'm going to build a condominium, or I'll put an industrial building here. And that leads me to another point. In development, whether it's commercial or industrial or residential, there's a place in effect where the magic happens. The change of farmland to high-density commercial or subdivision or industrial is done through the zoning process. That's where all of the money in real estate is made. So the politicians have the control over the value. The politicians are your friends, but they're not your friends. They have extraordinary demands on them for public services. And there are two ways for them to generate them. Taxes and taxes. There are either old taxes or there are new taxes. And a developer comes along and says, I'm going to turn this field that is growing soybeans into tax revenue for you into the future. They've got constituents all over who say, I don't care about that field. And they will allow it because they need the revenue. There are continuous demands on their goodwill to provide more revenue to other services. No government has grown smaller. They just don't do that. So the government, the same government that says you need a heritage district, is also got extraordinary demands on it to grow tax revenue. When you see a subdivision being built, when you see those houses to the south being built, all that is happening is the realization of that value change. The person that really made the money was the guy who went through the paper process of changing the value of the land. And so the people that can make the money on the development side, on the change of the zoning, are extraordinary. You never see them, you don't know them. I have a developer at the end of my street. They wanted to build a 28-story condominium. They weren't going to be the actual guys who hired the contractors to build the actual physical building. They're only there to change the value of the land. And as a result, they don't care what the building looks like in the end. The zoning only comes up with an outline of the density of it, the height and the area of it and that sort of thing. You don't know what you're going to get. So when you see rezoning applications, take them very seriously. People that you think are not necessarily your allies. I understand it's a family in the community that owns where the grocery store is in the Tim Hortons. Their interests are not antithetical to the core of the downtown. They're not antithetical to the rest of the community. That's where you buy, I presume, your groceries. You know, if you need antibiotics or whatever it is, that's where you go. They serve the community, they assist you, and they are of a benefit to you. And so you have mutual interests that are aligned. And it's understanding where those areas of commonality of interest are that are critical. And you're not going to stop this stuff that's going on. The push for the development is extraordinary. But as I say, when you see a rezoning application, take it very seriously. There are signs of a community that are that show a community is improving in value, and there are signs of community that are under stress. If you see nail salons, payday checking loans, tattoo parlors, that sort of thing, the community is under stress. You have to be aware that the development and the perception of your community can be slighted. Those businesses only exist because there's a need for them to exist. When Tim Hortons decided to locate here, they went through a quite sophisticated analysis. They looked at traffic flows, they looked at the core community, and they said, we think we can make money here. The grocery store is the same thing. Often there are small businesses in the community that are bellwethers of change that are not national chains. They are local, in parlance, mom and pop operations. And they will often be signposts of where the community is headed. So you will often see a coffee shop or a restaurant that is more upmarket or more downmarket that gives you a bellwether of what the changes are. So real estate executives, when they drive through the town, that's what they look for. They look for these little signs. The other aspect that's a bellwether of the change in the community is what the community itself looks like. Are there lilac bushes overhanging the curb? Are the gardens well tended? Are the houses well repaired? Or does everything look like it's down in the dumps? Developers look for that, and people that want to move to the community are looking for that. There's a house just up the street here with the painted brown that is beautifully restored. It's neat, and it looks like the day it was built. That to me is a bellwether of change because somebody was willing to invest in the community to that degree and take enough pride in their house that they looked after their garden. The area between the road, the curb, or the sidewalk or whatever is well tended, and the house looks nice. I look for those things. To speak a bit about the residential side of things, one of the aspects that in terms of a heritage community that you have to be aware of is time has been acting on this community for a very, very long time. And buildings are at risk continually. And the things that are most fragile on a building are the first things to disappear. Original paint, original trim, porches, the windows, the roofs, those things get changed. And the richness of the heritage of those structures gets washed away. Nobody ever built a building that was purposefully ugly. There was a reason for it, and often those things are missing. So I would encourage you, in terms of property value and in terms of your own house, to make careful, considered decisions about things that you do to improve your property. And if there's one book that should be in the municipal office, it's called Getting Your House Right. For somebody like myself that doesn't have any real inherent taste, it tells you what to do. It says, this doesn't work, this does, and you look at it and it makes perfect sense. If you have a series of windows that are all the same size, don't change it. Continue the sequence. It's an extraordinary book to have. In essence, though, you can make this community a larger, more affluent, vibrant sense of itself than it is today. You can, if you ignore the process, let other people rip and tear out of the community what they want. Put in the kinds of developments they want. I'll give you another example. Black brick, for some reason, has become trendy in Toronto. There are developers that are building entire subdivisions out of black brick. And that lovely buff or salmon red Ontario brick that you see in a lot of the houses around here doesn't exist. So having a care or concern about materials, simple things like materials, scale of projects is critical. If you look at the new housing subdivisions, a developer has chosen, their designer has chosen those brick patterns and the stone and the designs, sitting in an office with perhaps a different aesthetic than you, and they may be working and they may have a template for that all across Ontario. And they don't care where they put that subdivision. They just look at a series of economics. There's a piece of land, I can get it zoned, I can get it built, there's a demographic to buy it, we're done. And that's what they'll do. But if you become involved in the process, the Heritage District gives you something to lever against to protect yourself so that you can keep the essence of the community that you have. If you back off from it, while this change goes on, someone else will be in control of your lives. This is, other than the original founding of the community, you're going to live through in the next 10 to 15 years the greatest change that Cookstown has had since it was founded. It used to take the original First Nations and the fur traders about a day to get from Georgian Bay down to where I live at the mouth of the Humber River in Toronto. They'd paddle down eventually through Lake Simcoe, just south of here, portage over, and then there was a trail that ran down to the Humber River. The farms you see around you after the Simcoe-Nottawasaga purchase and the development of this community, the farms cut that fur trade route. And there was the original Toronto purchase and the Mississauga purchase. And then the purchase is up to Georgian Bay and Lake Simcoe cut the fur trade route. So the history you learned about in high school, that world ended for that group of people. You have to be careful because there are large events that are going on that very, very wealthy, very powerful people are going to bring to bear onto your community. But in case you think, again, this is new, originally land grants were offered for people that served in the War of 1812 or that served in the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars and for United Empire Loyalists. That system was taken advantage of by basically land speculators who got hold of large quantities of these patents and did nothing to develop the community. So in 1841 there was a new Land Act, and that Land Act basically said if you haven't taken your free farm, you forfeit it. And then they started to sell the land, and the government decided that Canada was a much nicer place to live than the United States. So they were going to sell the land to the immigrants coming from Great Britain or the rest of Europe at a higher price than the land in the United States because it was a nicer place. We have a much shorter growing season, our soil is way poorer, but because it was Canada, it was a better place, and so they priced the land higher. Development stalled. People came across, they looked at land price here, and they went south. It's the people that live in the community that create the value to that community. It's not the developers, it's not the government, it's the people who live here. And so in essence, it is up to you as the community to create your own value and to guide your own future. I love historic Ontario architecture. My view of it stems from the fact that the country we live in today is a direct outcome or creation of the people who first settled here. And I don't look at the past and think these were all wonderful people and they were perfect. They weren't. They had views that I don't hold, but somehow within 100, 150 years, society's evolved into what we have today. The core things of public education, the healthcare system we have, the economic system we have, the world that we live in today was largely an outgrowth of those people. When you read the history of early Ontario, you realize that the first thing they tried to do was improve a parcel of land, grow some crops, create an economy where they could sell that, some towns and communities, and right after that they built churches and schools. They were concerned, hugely concerned about their local democracy, so they took care about their government. So the world we live in today, the world you all enjoy, is related to the people that lived in those historic houses that you live in. When I look at those houses, I think a settler that looked at those fields today would go, wow, all the work is done. And my apologies to any farmers that are in the community. When you walked into the wilderness that was here, and you had to cut all those trees down before you could get to the point where you could build your house or you could farm the land, you had an extraordinary amount of work to do. And that work and that care is preserved in your historic building. The handheld planes that they use to create molding profiles, all those buildings tell an extraordinary story. And in essence, I would ask you on a personal level to appreciate those houses. The houses that you live in may not be as old as you think, or parts of them might be much, much older than you think. So you don't necessarily know what you have. Buildings could be much older than you realize. They could have multi-layers of history with them that you may not realize. And before you sort of rip and tear things apart, you need to inform yourself about the value of the patina and the value of the information that's in that house. And there are ways to preserve historic buildings that are critical. There's construction techniques and that sort of thing. The control of moisture especially is critical. And so when you're insulating buildings and that sort of thing, you change the way that they act. Those are critical issues. But those buildings, to me, tell a story, and there's a layer of history, there's layers of history in the community. And you can see where retired farmers moved to town and they built a larger house. So the evolution that creates this sort of eclectic tapestry of the variety of buildings in the community tell the story of it. And that story, for people that are living in anonymous condominiums downtown who can get in their cars and drive somewhere on the weekend, has value. They may well want to come and have lunch here. You have aspects like the bike path along the old rail line. You can be attracted to come and go biking here and whatever. They may actually want to come and live here as a result. They may look and say, you know, this is closer to Toronto than Barrie. It's got all sorts of quality of life things that you take for granted. But as I say, those things are all potentially at risk. And that's not the politicians doing. That's simply the force of change that is going on, and it cannot be stopped. You can